because it is in such its infancy, the people that think outside the box at the moment are the ones that are going to get rewarded in the way that they can combine technology with their art.
Welcome to the episode, Ren McGann. Nice to have you.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me.
If we can just kick it off, if you can just give me a bit of info about just your background, so I guess like where you're from over there, and then just a bit of a journey into how you got into surf photography, and specifically, I guess, like the right as well, which is like a wave that's the subject of a lot of your work.
Yeah, so I'm based in Western Australia. I spent the early part of my career up in Exmouth driving boats. I was up there for 10 years, doing a lot of ecotourism, did a lot of whale shark driving, lived at the Montebello's for 5 years. And, Exmouth's a beautiful place, but small town, so kind of needed a change. So I moved down to Margaret River. And the first trip I did to the right was with the idea of learning how to surf it. But that wave's terrifying. So I had a really old crap camera, and I just started taking photos of the wave down there with the idea of trying to learn it a little bit better to hopefully one day push the limit and surf it. But ended up just kind of becoming obsessed with taking photos of it, and I just that just never stopped. And it's every trip you do down there is different. It's a beautiful wave. It's a beautiful location. So that obsession kind of just grew and grew.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's like it's a fascinating wave. I mean, even just like the imagery of it and people be in awe just like looking at it. I was thinking about it, like the reality is that you're literally one of the only people, you know, in a small group of people like in the world that's like ever seen that wave in person. You know what I mean? I'm sure that, you know, there's like surfers and photographers that have gone there, but in the scheme of everyone, like it's a select few people. So for people that'll probably never get out there, like what's it like when you're actually there? I mean, I don't know if that's changed over time, but if you remember some of the first times you went there.
Yeah, it's pretty surreal because, like, it's a pretty infamous wave, and I'd definitely, like, become obsessed with it before I even saw it for the first time. So when you launch, you can launch from two different locations, and depending on which way you go, they're both about the same distance, probably about 9 mile of ocean crossings to get to it. And you kind of see the wave spray, like, in the distance looming from as you're approaching it, and when you rock up, it's just raw. Like there's so much energy in that ocean. There's big rocks that stick out of the water behind you. All the rocks on the inside. It's just chaos everywhere. And then you've got this like gigantic piece of water that just unloads on them, like an almost perfect granite slab. The only thing that really goes wrong with it is when you get the south direction in the swell, and you get that end bowl that has claimed a lot of people, but to be out there and experience it, it's still really hard to put into words.
Yeah,
what it's like. That's the reason I keep going back, and you can never get sick of it.
Yeah, 100%. Have you found it's something that I'm guessing the first time you ever see something like that, like I could just imagine like the first time going out and like seeing something like the camera, you'd just be like firing off shots just in awe. Like, have you found that like the more you go out now, you kind of start to maybe have a bit of an idea of, you know, if it's breaking well, like what you want to get, how you maybe want to compose some images, kind of you can be a bit more, you know, I suppose in the moment with the actual photographs you're taking?
It's actually a really good question, because that wave is so unpredictable in the way that it breaks, and I've missed that many good shots because you see a little lump coming through that you think will just do nothing, and it just hits the perfect little flare and it will throw something. So you kind of you have to shoot nearly every single wave that comes through, because some of the most beautiful images or waves I've ever seen out there are ones that I've missed just because I didn't think they were going to do it. But the first time I ever went out there was actually a tiny day, and it was barely even breaking. It was like 8 foot and just kind of crumbling off the top. But I was still so excited to actually just be in that position and see it. I just came home with 3,000 absolutely crap images. And it definitely needs certain conditions to do what it really should do. And I've learned over the last 8 years kind of my cutoff point now for going down. And the last 2 or 3 years have actually been really terrible in reaching those benchmarks, and it's mainly to do with the swell period. So if it's not over 16 seconds, you can pretty much guarantee, regardless of the size of the swell, it's not actually going to be really thick. You can still capture beautiful images of it, but
Yeah, I shoot a lot of backwash along the coast here, and it's that similar kind of thing that you're talking about, that it's almost like as soon as you see the water starting to come together, you just kind of have to shoot through it because you just don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of the time, if you think it's going to be one of those ones that's just a bit too small, that's when it's just the most perfect flare that like comes up. So it's like you just got to kind of be ready all the time.
Oh man, I've been gutted that many times, like watching it, and you know it's hard when you're looking through the viewfinder in your camera, and you kind of like, as the shutter's shutting and opening and shutting, you kind of don't even know what you captured at the time, and to go back through and see it. But then the ones that I haven't had been shooting and you've watched them in real life, it's like, man, that sucked. I missed that one.
That's hilarious. So talk to me about mindset in general. So obviously, I mean, when we're talking about like going out to shoot waves like that, there's, you know, potentially things that can happen. So that's a mindset thing. But then also, I mean, you're doing photography now, like as a business, you're doing YouTube and putting yourself out there. You're like moving into the NFT world. So all of this sort of stuff, like, you know, when you're becoming a creator is definitely involves a mindset of there's going to be a point of, you know, you're going to have to maybe go beyond your comfort zone. So can you kind of maybe talk to that in your career so far, like how that's kind of, you know, been something you've overcome, if it is something you've had to?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the thing that's helped me out a lot is, it is tricky. Obviously, photography is just in general is a tricky industry to work within because there is so much competition. But I think the thing that saved it for me is just not putting pressure on myself to produce or do any specific type of art, and just focusing on creating my own unique style of art and just becoming obsessed with the process of doing that rather than the end result. And that's what's kind of, you know, it's what made going and doing all these trips possible, because like cameras aren't cheap, fuel's not cheap, every single trip you do is not cheap. Nothing in Western Australia is close to anything. So to even get to the closest good way, you know, we're driving 3 hours from home, and then you've got a full day on the jet ski, you've got 3 hours back. So there's so much time, money and energy that's gone into even just pulling off one trip. And if you get down there and it's a flop, you need those backups that kind of like get you through the shit times, I suppose. And for me, it's just becoming obsessed with editing. And I think that's one thing that I really focused on super early on in my career, was just becoming obsessed with Photoshop. And from that, I suppose you could say that I've found a niche and also developed more income and stuff from just becoming obsessed with the post-production side of things.
Yep, 100%. So that like brings me to the next point. So in the last written interview that we did, there's a quote from that I'll read to lead me to the next question, which you said, "The way a photographer edits their work in some way is a window into the way they view the world. For me, the ocean and especially big waves are just so surreal. So I definitely try to reflect that in my work." So yeah, like you're absolutely right. Your editing is definitely a signature of your work, and you've as I said, you've done YouTube tutorials on it, and you do a lot of, you know, social media posts like showing your workflow. So I guess, yeah, what's that view of the world for you in terms of like your photography, and how does that sort of tie into the creative process for your editing?
I think it was just like when I first started, and I just remember looking around and thinking, okay, well, this photography thing's pretty cool. And I just remember like viewing a lot of people's work and finding it quite similar. And, you know, I was like, if I'm going to do something, I might as well just do it my way and not really care what happens. And that was the whole process of learning Photoshop. So it was actually kind of like not a mistake how I ended up with my own style, but it's that creative process of going through a program and making sure you're exploring that program in its fullest potential to then turn it around and turn it into something that's uniquely yours. So a lot of my style was just from playing around in Photoshop and, pushing things way too far, pushing them under, just trying weird stuff. And, over the 8 years, that's refined down to the technique that I've got now. And I think it's been super beneficial, and it's what's kept it, really interesting for me, because, you edit the same waves, the same content, the same subject matter over and over and over again. But that's the beautiful thing about shooting the ocean and surf and all that. It's like it doesn't matter whether you shoot the same wave 1,000 times. Every wave is different, and just the way that you can approach it. Like some edits, like I just feel like every wave has its different personality, and some edits I can't do my editing style on them, because I've got great images that are beautiful in their own right, but they don't suit my style, so I just don't edit those shots. So I think it's a balance between figuring out what works for you and not imposing your will on the art.
Yeah, 100%. And is your style something that is kind of just going to be ever evolving, do you think, as far as the editing goes? And secondly to that is, as you've learnt like the editing over the last few years, have you gone back to previous images that you've shot and kind of like adapted it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm constantly re-editing all of my work. So most of the time I'll do an edit, just sit on it for a day or two, and then throw it out, start again, do the same one again, do the same one again. And I think that's like, it's interesting going back and looking at my work from a year ago to 5 years ago to 8 years ago, and it is constantly evolving. And I think the main area that it's involving is speed. Edits used to take me like upwards of 7 hours per image, but now I've got that down to a really complex edit will be 40 minutes, and the average edit will be somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. But I just really wanted to dedicate a lot of time to figuring out how to reverse engineer what I do so that I can teach it better. Because I just think so many people are scared to go into Photoshop, but it's just such an underutilized platform, and it's actually super easy once you know a few little tips and tricks.
Oh man, I know myself that like even just like looking at some of the time lapse like of your edits and stuff, like when I'm looking at it, I'm like, I didn't even know how those things are possible, like what's going on. So there's definitely a lot to learn. So are you teaching it as a thing, like beyond kind of the sort of the social media and YouTube stuff that you're doing? Like, are you teaching it for work?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, work is a relative term, I suppose. I just like helping people get more out of their art, like money's never really been something that I've prioritized in my life, and I've been working with a young kid, Jarvis, for the last 2 years, and awesome. He was 14 when I started working with him, and we've just kept in touch and kept working. And he's like such an incredible artist and so much talent. But for me, it's more about just helping people just get past that barrier and bleed more out of their art and be more creative, and that's more rewarding than money. But I am doing some stuff with Sony at the moment. I've given a few talks with them, and I do have a upcoming advanced Photoshop workshop with Camera Electronic. So it is something I'm going to pursue more and more now, just because I feel like I've refined my process far enough to be able to teach it in a way that doesn't impose my style on other people, because there's no point teaching someone to replicate what I do. You need to be able to teach someone to take the tools of Photoshop and apply it to their own art, so it becomes signature theirs, instead of just creating more versions of myself.
100%, man. That's amazing. That's really cool that you're doing that work with the kids and stuff. So 2020, you won the Nikon Surf Photographer of the Year. Obviously, an amazing photo. How was that experience? Well, actually, what I wanted to do is, because in like a lot of these interviews, I wanted to kind of like pick out maybe like a photo that people have taken and kind of, you know, get a bit of a behind the image on it. So that image in particular, like that day looked just like that image itself just looks like scary. So do you kind of like remember the situation of that time when you shot that? And then I guess beyond that, did the competition, like, did that kind of, you know, open any doors for you or help you progress in any way with your photography?
Yeah, I suppose first up, that day was probably the last actually really good day we've had at the right. Like, it has been really bad. It's actually been really shit for 2 years. But yeah, that day was the last really good big day we've had there. And Dan, who was surfing that wave, he actually got one probably like half an hour or 40 minutes before that. I don't know if you've seen that one. There's a photo of him free falling down the face.
Yeah.
So he got absolutely punched on that. Yeah. So he, I think he blew his eardrum on that one. Got absolutely flogged by it, but then recovered for a little while and then went back out the back and then got that nugget and come through, and just there's just something about it. You just know what the ones when they come from that west and they hit that big bowl and they throw that really big projected lip out. And that's what I was saying before about the period being really important, because you just don't get that projection and thickness in the lip without that period being up around 18 seconds. But yeah, it was just one of those freaky ones, you know, everything lines up perfectly. And not only did you get the size, the projection, the thickness and all that stuff, but it actually had quite a lot of texture in the lip with the light bouncing off it, which gave me a lot of opportunity to work with in post-production. But yeah, funnily enough, I entered that competition because I was kind of in association with Nikon at the time, and I'd totally forgotten that I even entered the competition when they called and said you won. And then everything that followed after it was, I don't know, it was cool, man, but it was pretty overwhelming. You know, a lot of interviews with newspapers and magazines and the news and all that kind of stuff. I'm a pretty introverted person in some ways, so I found that quite overwhelming. But yeah, I think what doors it opened, I don't know. It's so hard to quantify something like that. It definitely gives you some form of recognition, or I don't know. It is so hard to quantify something like that, but it definitely helps in your career to be able to say you're an award-winning photographer. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's perfect, man. That's all good. That's all good. So, I want to, if it's cool, jump into the NFT stuff. So, I'm like, I guess, just aware of the space to some degree, but like you've really kind of taken a dive into there. So I guess I just wanted to get a bit of like, you know, it's something that's becoming like interesting, I suppose, for a lot of photographers. I think a lot of photographers maybe kind of don't necessarily understand it or know what they could do with a photograph in there, because it felt like it was a lot of artwork and digital creations and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering if you could give us the like 101 version of, you know, photography and NFTs to start with, and then maybe just kind of some ideas of where you think it's going.
Yeah, it's an exciting new platform or utilization of art, and I think it's something that everyone should be exploring. I suppose it comes with a big caveat to start with, that it is linked to the crypto world, and like the crypto world, everything has its ups and downs. So we're currently in what would be considered a bear market, which is down. And when I entered the NFT space, we were on the very upward side, near the peak of a bull market, which is when it's up. So it was pretty crazy to like switch platforms, because most of the NFT stuff happens on Twitter. and I'd never used Twitter before, and I got hit up by a mate and said, you got to jump in here and just give it a go, you know. So I jumped in, but because I entered at that time, which was at the peak of the bull market, it was just chaos in there. Like it really didn't matter what was being minted. Everything was being sold. It was really exciting, and there was so much that was going on. And since we've kind of dipped down into this the bear market now, the space has definitely slowed down, but and I've seen a lot of people leave because of that. But I think it's just another one of those, another modality to kind of get into and to utilize for selling your art, because you can make a lot of money in there. I was fortunate enough to have entered in the time that I did, and you know, I spent a lot of time on Twitter putting that legwork in to start with. But you know, it paid off for me in a big way. So
awesome.
I think it is really confusing when you start talking about non-fungible tokens and Ethereum blockchain and all these things, but it's really quite simple in the way that it works. It's just another form of your artwork being in a market that's for sale. And a lot of the common questions you get is like, is Ethereum real money? Or, you know, how long does it, can I cash my money out, and all those kinds of things. And for example, if I minted a piece now and sold it and got paid in Ethereum, which is almost instant, I would be able to cash that money out into Australian dollars and it be in my bank account within 4 minutes. So it's probably quicker than regular banking. But there's a lot that I've learned along the way, and a lot I probably would have done differently. But there was so much hype at the time that I kind of like minted work, and I had like zero expectation of stuff. But my first collection sold out in, I think, like under a minute. So I did, my first collection was a drop of 30 images staggered into 10 images per drop, staggered a week apart. So the first one sold out in under a minute, the second one sold out in under half an hour, and the last one sold out within 6 hours. And since then, I've done a heap more drops and gotten to the point where I've pretty much sold out of art that I've created. But yeah, it's definitely something I think everyone should be exploring. And the fact that we are in a bear market, it's a great opportunity to go in and get your head around the space, learn it and connect, because it's the same as Instagram. You know, you can't jump onto Instagram and just expect heaps of people to just start following your account. It is about fostering that community and getting to know people and building relationships and understanding what it is that is happening. So yeah, it's just another platform to utilize, and I think everyone should be on it and should be pursuing it, but enter it with patience. And yeah, I think it's just it's about being patient and having realistic expectations.
Yeah, for sure. So is that like, I mean, you kind of wrapped up it a bit at the end, but if I'm going to interpret that, is that like, so if I'm, I guess, branding myself as a photographer traditionally, like on social media platforms, and then I'm, you know, ultimately getting a following and selling prints, say, as an example, like for the physical world, is it just a similar comparison that you're just kind of moving into a space where, I guess, you know, like you said, you moved to Twitter because that's kind of where the world of NFT kind of conversations is going on at the moment. And it's sort of a matter, again, of then recreating that branding of your work in order to sell it digitally through NFTs. Is that kind of a fair comparison?
Yeah. It works almost exactly the same way as like fine art printing world would work. So, you know, say you took the best image of your life and you're saying this image is the absolute pinnacle of everything that I've ever taken, and to create more rarity and value in this image, I'm going to limit it to a one print edition. So whoever buys this image, they own that image and it will never be printed again. Yeah. So this is like what you would attribute like a rarity factor to an NFT. So there's different marketplaces across the board for NFTs, and some of them are for like open edition images. So if you've got an open edition print image, you can print that as many times as you like and sell it as many times as you like. So there's the two different markets kind of running parallel with each other, where I have open edition NFT markets, which means I sell the NFT, which is a one-of-one NFT, so it'll only be the single digital version of that image, but it also means that I can print that image as many times as I like. So I'm not closing off one revenue stream without the other, but then there are more exclusive platforms where whoever buys that NFT, so like Super Rare for me, if you buy an NFT on Super Rare, you're the only person that can own that image, full stop. I'm not allowed to print it. I'm not allowed to do anything with it. You're buying the single one-of-one digital version, and I also would hand over, a compressed Photoshop full resolution copy to that collector to be able to print if they want.
Yeah, cool. So, to people who kind of, because I've done like a little bit of, research like in the space and understand like the ownership, the digital ownership aspect of NFTs and everything. But I guess to people who don't really know anything about it, to sort of maybe dumb down the questions a bit, if someone's buying a print, like for a traditional photographer, if someone's buying a print, then they're buying it to maybe put on their wall, right? You can kind of, that's a fairly standard transaction that people can understand. So why are people buying NFTs? Is it only the digital ownership, or what's the potential use case for someone who's going to buy one? Like, is this in the future when other things become more digital, or how do you see that part of it?
Yeah, I think the future of, I suppose, where the market is kind of growing in momentum is that push towards digital, and there's already screen manufacturers that are creating photo frames. I mean, digital photo frames have been around for a while, but now they're specializing in like full resolution, 4K readout, true color, and they're slim enough that they actually look like a photo frame. So you can put these frames up in your house or anywhere, and it can cycle through the NFTs that you own. There is also that use case for projection or digital walls in the future. I think, the things that you see in movies where it's like your whole wall of your house is, a moving image and things like that. I don't think that that's too far away. And I think a lot of the NFT early adoption thing kind of just following that, that trend in tech evolution, I suppose. And the other part about it is proof of ownership. So say you bought one of my physical prints, there's really no way to prove that physical print came from me. Like, it could be someone stealing my identity, or, who pulled one of my images off Instagram or done whatever, and you bought it thinking you're buying it from me. And there really isn't a strong chain of custody that goes along with that. But with the NFTs, it's an irrefutable 100% proof of ownership, 100% proof of creatorship as well. And the other cool part about it is that there's built-in royalties. So if you start in this industry and you spend time building your portfolio up, your popularity, or all of this stuff is usually tied to social standing and Instagram and all those other things. It's no different in there. But when I sell one of my pieces encoded in the smart contract that goes up to the Ethereum blockchain, is a part of coding that says if the person I sell it to sells it in the future, 10% of that commission comes back to me as a royalty because I'm the original creator. So it does have like a really strong use case for rewarding creators that do start and put that legwork in early, and then, for lack of a better word, become famous down the line. There's people in there selling one-of-one photos for well over $100,000. So you think about the secondary sale on that. If it sells for $200,000, you're getting 10% of that, and then that's in perpetuity. So it's not like one-off. every time that image gets resold, 10% goes to you. So
yeah, cool. And so like it can just be just straight up, I guess, photos as we know them. You know what I mean? Like I guess because a lot of the initial stuff that came out tended to be a bit more digital art. But and I know that's like it's a blurry line when you're like, when you're editing photos anyway, but like for just photographers that kind of, aren't overly, digitizing their art, it's fairly similar to, like what they've shot. There's still like, it's still a platform for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's for any art. There's, there's use cases for, songs and music and, there's people that have dabbled in the world of sculptures and things like that. So they'll sell the NFT as a photo of the sculpture, but that's the digital representation of the piece that you're buying. But then as part of buying that, they actually send you the physical sculpture. So it is really just like an open market about however you want to approach it. And I suppose because it is in such its infancy, the people that think outside the box at the moment are the ones that are going to get rewarded in the way that they can combine technology with their art. There's people that are encoding, because it's all done through AI. There's people that are coding in art with geolocation timing. So during the day, the art piece will change, or it might flick through different images, or there's a clock built into it. So when the buyer buys it in their location, that art is evolving and changing throughout the daytime. So it's literally limitless in the way that you can approach it.
So does it have to be like intrinsically tied to like the, you said like it's a bear market and understand that about the crypto markets. Does it have to be always tied to that, or is it just like at this point in time because people will just start getting scared when like a market goes into a bear market, or is it something that over time when people understand more what an NFT is and you just price it according to whatever the price of Ethereum is at that time, that can kind of run sort of or can be successful independently, or will it follow the trends of the market?
I think it'll always follow the trends of the market, mainly because of the fact that it's more of like an economic problem rather than a market problem. And the fact that we kind of did go through a bit of a recession, and we're kind of still in that. People are more reluctant to spend money, but there's something weird that happens with crypto in a bull market where a bear market is typically the time to buy crypto because you're buying at a lower price, and then once it goes up, people just go crazy because they make multi-millions of dollars overnight, and it's rare to be able to pick the tokens that are going to do that, but there's no shortage of people that have made a hell of a lot of money doing it. So I think that's part of it, but I think it will always be tied to it because it is part of that crypto scene. And I think entering this space and understanding what crypto is and having a good understanding about what fiat currency is really important because it is tied to that, and Bitcoin being the main leading currency, a great book to just wrap your head around this industry, this sphere, or this trading platform would be the Bitcoin Standard by Safety Mamous. It kind of runs through what all of the kind of currencies that have come and gone throughout the times, dating back ages when people used to use rocks as currency. So I think the market is set for a currency change, and it doesn't take much to dig into fiat currency and realise that it's a bit of a broken system, and they're just printing money out of thin air, and it doesn't have any value tied to it. So, it's exciting on that front, and then it's exciting to be in the kind of pointy end of something that could pioneer into the future currency. So all of these little things actually help the crypto world because it adds more use case and more utility and more validity to those things. So it's exciting, but I think definitely educate yourself a little bit on it, and that book is a great starting point. It just literally sums everything up quite succinctly, and or at least have you a good understanding of what you're doing.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely. That I'm just sort of thinking out loud now, but like for creators that are wanting to get into it, because obviously they're like the narrative like in any market is, you know, you want to try and like buy low and sell high. If you're a creator putting like an NFT into the market and you put it in a bear market, then chances are someone's going to buy it at a lesser price, right? At that point in time, then maybe it would be worth in a bull market, like just as an you know, basic example. Then on this perpetuity thing, if someone buys your art for a low price, but then the market goes crazy and then they resell it for like a really high price, you're still then going to benefit from that percentage of perpetuity. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And it's tricky. Price dynamics are actually one thing that, like, there's so many people that, you know, claim to be experts in this field, and no one knows anything. You know, something that works for someone is, there's no way that 100% you can create a formula and say, you know, this is the way to do it. There's definitely things you can do to help along that way, but I think I've been in the space long enough to know that I've seen people come in, you know, pump their art, and nothing sells, and then they just get sick of it and bail. And it's not about that. You need to come into it understanding that it is a really long-term play. Even though it's a big scene and a lot of people have made money now, the percentage of people that are on NFTs at the moment is so small, and then the percentage of people in NFT world that are actually buying, like, so what we'd call a collector, that's even smaller. So it's just got so much room to grow. So I think enter it with like a really long-term plan, a long-term strategy, and price dynamics. Man, I've made mistakes. I've done things. I definitely would have done things differently if I had a do-over. But yeah, it is that. Like, there's people that have made a lot of money coming in and doing free mints. So they give the images away for free, which brings in a large base of people that are holding your work, but then they have that 10% royalty commissioned in. So something that they gave away for free, you know, over the course of the year, if they've played their strategy right and built their portfolio or profile up and, you know, become some form of an influence in that scene, that free mint might have made them 50 grand by the end of the year. It is, you know, again, it's use case, and you have to play the game. You have to do all the things. You're going to make mistakes, but I think the main point about it is just hanging in there and persisting with it, because there's every chance that could be the next big thing that happens. You know, they're talking about NFT use cases for so many different things now.
Yeah, man. No, it's a fascinating world. So it's really cool to get your insight on it. So I guess just to finish it up, just a fun one, because we're on a surf photography podcast. So is there any surf photographers that have inspired your journey, you know, to get into it in the first place? And then secondly, are there any surf photographers that you know of that we probably don't know about that you could kind of shout out as a way for people to learn about some new names?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of, like, the normal big names that come to mind, as, you know, Audie and Ange and Kim Feast and all those guys. And there's some mad crew over in Tahiti, Warren Cleanan, Ray Collins. I do love Ray Collins' abstract stuff. But yeah, I mean, part of the way that I approached it and how I kind of fell into photography, it wasn't like I was obsessed with photography and you know, really looking up to these guys. I was kind of doing it as a use case to try and learn how to do that wave. So I kind of skipped that whole, you know, idolizing different surf photographers and things like that. And then surprisingly, the people that I actually really kind of like looked up to and admired were people that were doing really creative editing stuff. And one of those was Year Ren, who's a wedding photographer in Melbourne. I think, you know, that's where I learned a lot about reverse engineering his side of things. So a lot of the photography stuff that I kind of really admired was to do with portraiture rather than surf. just
Yep.
because
Yep.
it's so much harder to edit portraits than it is to edit landscape. So it was great to study those people and then kind of bring what I learned from editing portraiture over to editing surf and landscape. And I think that's a really good way to go about it. As far as underlying new up and comers, Jarvis Mormon, he's definitely going to be one to watch in the future.
Cool.
Yeah, Matt Walsh, he's a legend in Tahiti. But yeah, man, there's talent everywhere you look, and that's the good and the bad about all these social media platforms. It's if you know how to manipulate the algorithm, you become popular, and there's so many people that just love taking photos, and they're incredibly talented about what they do, but they hate the social media battle. It's that their images don't get the recognition they deserve because they don't like spending the time on Instagram. I'm like, I've got more admiration for people like that than I do for people that have 1 million followers and their art just looks the same. So.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's a crazy necessary evil these days in that world, isn't it? But yeah, that's cool, man. No, thanks for shouting those guys out anyway, because it's good to find out about a few new people. Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much. That was super interesting. It's fascinating all round. I think your stuff, from the waves that you're photographing are so different to what most people are doing, through to your editing, and and then this NFT world. I'm going to keep diving deeper into that, and hopefully some people have got some stuff out of that to keep looking into it, because 100% agree that it's the future. So it's something that people need to just look into. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And cheers.
No worries. Cheers, man. Always good catching up.